Hello and welcome. Today we will be interviewing Rick and Lindsay Hunter of the Rising Star Cave System Expedition. We'll be exploring their stories and learning all about their travels. Let's get started. Okay, I believe we're recording now, so hello and welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
We are here with Rick and Lindsay Hunter. Both, of course, are very well known in the paleoanthropological world. Oh, yes, you are. Be quiet. um, but we're here today to talk to them and to just hear their stories, hear a little bit about what they do, see what tales they want to tell, and what knowledge and experience they have to offer to maybe people who are just starting off and wondering where to start. So if we were going to do this a little differently, but now that you're both here, I think we'll just do this chronologically. So Lindsay, why don't you tell us how you ended up in a cave in South Africa looking at these fossils, and what did it feel like the first time you were down there?
Well, I think to really properly start out chronologically, I'm going to throw him under the bus because he was actually, he and Stephen were the first ones to actually
It is true.
set eyes on the fossils. They set all of this in motion. I would not be part of this story without
It
them.
is true. So if we want to start with Rick.
Idiots and throwing caution to the wind and going down deep, dark holes that no one knew they were down.
They didn't know where we were, kind of.
They didn't know you were down that hole. They were not going to find you. Oh.
Okay, so I started caving beginning of 2013, but I had been rock climbing and spent a lot of my time outdoors for many years before that. But the moment I went to my first caving trip, everything changed. I was told that it was going to get a little bit muddy, it was going to be a little bit dark, and my thought process was that there was going to be a gift shop there, and it was going to be an easy route through the cave. 5 minutes later, after I had reached the entrance to the cave, I was waist deep in water. Thankfully, I left my phones on the surface. And I was squeezing through areas where the gentleman in front of me, his overall was tearing because it was rather narrow. A little bit later through that first trip, I was able to get an area where only Stephen, who had taken myself and one other person off to see, where he had been the first person to be.
This is Stephen Tucker.
Stephen Tucker.
Right.
And
okay.
In that room where he had taken me, there was a little, he hadn't explored it fully because he was the only one that could get there the first time he went down. But now that he had 3 extra people, we were able to explore this room. So we were the first people to actually see this, ever. And I looked over and over a little ledge, and I looked down into this pathway or passage, and you saw 2 cliffs and this river just extending into nowhere. And my eyes were the first ever to have seen it. No other human being had ever seen that.
This is not Rising Star.
This is not Rising Star. This is a totally different cave. But
okay.
that
is confused,
my interest in caving, to be the first person. And a week later, I was underground in another cave. And then, up over the next couple months, I was underground more than I was on the surface. And we were trying to find these areas where no one had discovered, and trying to extend the surveys and see areas for the first time. And I got a GoPro and filming beautiful formations, and that's what led us to Rising Star on Friday the 13th of September 2013. We had previously found a little area that we thought might go, and decided to go out on Friday the 13th because of why not? And 6 o'clock we arrive at the cave in the evening.
Who was we?
Stephen and myself. Stephen Tucker. Yeah, she's been interviewed a lot more than me.
No, I'm his interpreter.
Trust me, I understand.
Arrived at the cave, and pushed this little area, and it ended up to be no larger than a car's trunk. It was tiny.
Oh, that's
I'm
being American.
Using American words. and it's now 6:30 in the evening. We've cleared up till 1 a.m. So we've told the caving club where we're going to be in the cave, at the Rising Star Cave, and we decide, well, he's going to show me a little bit more of a difficult area in the cave. The dragon's back. So we head through there, and it's this pinnacle that's fallen from the ceiling by the looks of it, and it looks like a dragon's back. You have to climb up. You've got falls on either side. You're walking this razor's edge. You get to the top, and there's this gap that you have to jump across. You jump across the gap into this little complex little tunnel passage of Swiss cheese, and there's pretty formations all over the place. Now, I've been following Stephen. He's in front of me, and there's a really pretty set of formations in front of me, but he's in the way. So I'm going to climb over it. He crawls into this little gap in the floor. I crawl over. I'm busy filming, and he's just going to explore this little crack he's crawled into, which didn't look like anything, but it kept going down. And I finished my little bit of recording and waited, and I hear the words that every caver wants to hear. It goes. And he keeps quiet. He just tells me that it goes. It's like, okay, I've got to get down there. Crawl into this area that is narrow. You're squeezing to the point where you can't bend your knees. It's literally, you slot down and lock your hips. Crawl down and you fall and you lock and you work your way down 12 meters. Imagine 2-3-story buildings that are ranging from 10 inches to 20 inches down to 7 inches apart. Not this very straight route down. You work your way through that, and I look out into where it's opened. There's one wall and then nothing. So there's nothing to lean your back against at this point, and it's a 4-meter drop. And I look out, and it is just dark. And I hear Stephen chuckling in the background. He's just laughing at me. So
cavers are evil.
Yeah, no, he spent about 10-15 minutes laughing at me trying to climb down this with the cat over the bathtub type grab, trying to get down. Eventually I get to the bottom, and we see that this little chamber that we're in extends. It's got a little passage that runs off. So we go through and we explore. And at this point, we all know that things go, other animals go into caves and they die in caves. So we find bones quite often. So we get to this little chamber, there's a couple bones on the floor, we don't think anything of it. Step over them, keep going. And we explored this area and tried to go as far as possible through the cave. And eventually about 10-11 o'clock at night, we've reached the end of this little passage. And we decide we're going to turn around and start moving back. We move back to this little chamber where we found the bones, and decide we're going to take a little bit of a break because the climb up is difficult. And while we are sitting there, we look around, there's a tooth and another tooth, and then we see a mandible. And our first instinct was that it was the last person that went down there and didn't make it back up. That looked so close to human. Stephen was coming from a accounting background. I was coming from construction. We knew absolutely nothing about anatomy, but they looked like human teeth.
They've seen inside their own mouths.
Yeah, we were comparing to each other at that point. But previously, we had been asked by a colleague of ours, Pedro Boschhoff, if we come across anything, any cool-looking fossils or anything unusual, just to let him know. And at that point, the GoPro had died, and we didn't have any cameras with us, and there was no way we could safely get any of the fossils to the surface because this was a very thin passage that would have crumbled everything. And we weren't sure at that point if we were able to climb back up. And we knew that the caving club didn't know exactly where we were. So it was one of those, we needed to be very careful in doing this, so less distractions. So we made it a point to remember where we were after looking around and seeing as much as we could. And we climbed back up, and a few days later we were able to tell Pedro about this, and he was working for Berger at the time, and told us to go back and get photographs. So a week later, on South Africa's Heritage Day, Stephen and I went back down into the cave and spent 15 hours underground photographing these fossils and looking for more.
With his mom's measuring
With
tape.
my mom's fabric or sewing measuring tape.
I think I have seen that exact measuring tape in the documentaries.
Yeah, it came back and was never returned to full color after that. But we took photos and we explored the rest of the cave, or parts of the rest of the cave, to see if we could find anything else. And that's the footage that we, or at least the photographs that we took through to Lee, and that's what kicked off everything. And that's where Lindsay comes in after we actually dropped off everything at him. I was sitting on Facebook at the time while Pedro and Stephen were knocking on Lee's door, and I was just getting short messages. It's like, we're on the way to Lee's house. At Lee's house, knocking on his door. He's offering us coffee. Coffee's gone away. We're getting beer. And so I was getting play-by-plays via Facebook Messenger of how all of this was happening. And it moved so fast from that moment up until the 5th of November or the 6th of November when the actual expedition started.
Remember.
That is just utterly amazing. Now, just real quick.
It's really funny because when Lee tells the story about Pedro coming to visit him like late at night at his gate, I think he is trying to play out the fact that Pedro is a very large, imposing looking guy.
Yeah, I give that off. And
so, sort of like there's something slightly sinister about it. I don't know if I should let this guy in. But we all know that the reason that you wouldn't want to let Pedro in that late at night is because he has a gob on him and he will not shut up.
One of the best talkers on the planet. He will just keep
for
going.
Hours. So you should
that is wonderful. Because Lee does give off. When I was just watching the Nova Nat Geo special, just to re-up on a few facts, and Lee definitely does make it very like, some big guy was outside my gate and it's 9 o'clock at night.
More like some guy who will talk your ear off was outside my gate, and how am I going to get him to leave?
Okay, so as everyone might notice, we might look a little bit different. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties with our last interview. We got our first part out with Rick telling his story, of course, which was wonderful. Now we're going to go to Lindsay's side of things, and we're going to talk a little bit about what she's doing now, and then we're going to talk about Rising Star again. So, Lindsay, what are you doing now, and what is CARTA?
Okay, so I am now working with the Center for Academic Research and Training in Anthropology, which is CARTA. It's an organizational research unit at UC San Diego, and it's really sort of like it's a transdisciplinary group of scientists, of academics from all different fields that all come together 3 times a year to discuss various topics that are pertinent to anthropology, which is just fancy for human origins. So CARTA is about where we come from, how we came to be the way that humans are, the things that are weird about humans and unique to us, and explores it from many different angles. So not just the paleoanthropologists, the people that are studying the bones, but people that are looking at it from genetics, people who are in even social sciences. We had a fantastic symposium last year that was on the effects of maternal deprivation in early life, which is something you might not necessarily think of as being a human origins related subject, but there's obviously going to be, profound effects on a organism that come from, what its early life is like, and that's going to have something to do with the trajectory of how that species is going to either survive or really thrive as humans have. And our most recent symposium was really cool because it was the impact of infectious disease on humans and our origins. So we had a lot of local, to the La Jolla area in California, a lot of local scientists who study infectious diseases of one kind or another, and pooling their expertise to explore how these diseases, we don't just learn to survive, but how they sort of shape where we live and how we live in places and various aspects of human evolution. So that was really fun, and it's been very exciting to hold the position as the community engagement and advancement director. So I look for ways to bring more people to the joy that is CARTA, because they are free symposia that are recorded and archived on UCTV and also on our website, which is carta.anthropology.org. So we have lots of free resources that are available for people who are stuck at home, not able to go out in the field or to collaborate with other researchers as they might normally, that we are able to provide some alternatives for you that hopefully will jumpstart new ways of looking at your research.
And that's great. I think that's a very noble cause. And I think it's definitely, I know during lockdown, I've watched quite a few of your symposium videos on YouTube on a very wide range of topics all dealing with human evolution. And it's been a great resource to have. So I'm very thankful for it.
Really good, I think, also for some of the instructors out there that are finding themselves teaching online for the first time and need sort of some go-tos to develop that online curriculum, because we have a lot of people don't realize that for each one of our symposia, we have a glossary that sort of helps break down the jargon that you might hear within one particular field. And so
that is awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, and then we have that as a running glossary that's fully searchable, but also discreetly available for each symposium. So it's really, a lot of resources that love to have people, get in touch with me and find new ways to use this stuff on our site, because it's all free and we just want to get it out there.
And what is the best way? I know when we were talking previously, you said it's a little difficult to navigate the site.
Because there's so much information. There is so much that we have there. We're looking for new ways to make it more intuitive for a casual user to come in and find or discover things. So if you just want to even just drop me an email at khunter@ucsd.edu, I'll be happy to point you towards anything that you'd like.
Wonderful. Perfect. I think that's a great resource. I know it's something that we share on the page. Definitely whenever I watch something, I share it. And I love CARTA and everything it's about. So that was the actual reason why I originally contacted you, was about.
Yeah, that was really very cool.
And then I found out, of course, you were a part of the original 2013 Rising Star expedition for Homo naledi.
Yep.
Now that made me even more excited. So why don't you tell us not a little bit, I kind of want to know a lot of it about your experience, how you went from where you were to a cave deep, dark in South Africa, bringing up these most precious human fossils that are more rare than diamonds. And
so that's one of the jokes that we had around Rising Star was one of the cavers, Sherry. He said, everyone tells us that these fossils are so rare, but they don't really seem to be.
No.
Because, we're bringing up so much stuff.
Right.
It was really incredible. So I guess I have a rather eclectic CV. So done lots of weird things. And I was at a point where I was not feeling that I fit with paleoanthropology, and that, much as I love the subject and I love many of the people, that the politics and, sometimes, not so nice bits were, taking the fun out of it for me. And so I was thinking, well, maybe it's, it's time to move on to something else. And of course, that was right at the time where I was writing medical content for a hospital website. And I was trying to meet a deadline. So I was living in rural Texas with my parents to sort of kickstart this new way that I was going to go. And as I lived out there, they didn't have Wi-Fi. So I had to find a coffee shop in town, and I was staying up late there. So I was probably one of the first people in the States that saw, posted from South Africa, that there was a search for skinny scientists. And it was such a tantalizing description, so vague, but it was including parts that were really interesting to me, that it seemed sort of like, oh my gosh, this is really cool. I should definitely take a look. So because I saw it was in South Africa, and I previously spent a month in South Africa doing research, I really enjoyed my time there. I thought it was a great country. I really enjoyed the students and people that I interacted with there. So that seemed like a good opportunity. And then it was Lee Berger, who he was a little bit like outside like the norm of paleoanthropology. People are sort of like, he was like the maverick, doing his own thing in South Africa. And I had gotten a really positive impression of him from the 2011 meetings, when he had first started publicizing Australopithecus sediba. And I was a member of the education committee at the AAPAs, and I never could get anyone from my university, anyone on my PhD committee, or my supervisor, to ever come and see the work that we were doing, which was putting together workshops on the Saturday for local teachers. And I developed a module on forensic anthropology, and I was really proud of it. And I felt like this was a really important thing to do. And people at my school were like, you were so wasting your time. And they were really fed up with me doing stuff like that. So I felt pretty well vindicated when Lee Berger was taking the fossils, the first fossil cast, rather, of Sediba, and he was the hot ticket. Everyone wanted to see those casts, and he spent an hour with our high school teachers. I mean, we locked the door. There were people who were literally trying to like bust in, who wanted to join now because that was where the fossil casts were. And he spent an hour patiently explaining to the teachers and telling them how they could get casts of their own. And I thought that was really cool. And that was really an extraordinary thing at that time, to be that, open with your time and your resources. And I thought that was super cool. So when I saw that it was South Africa, and it was Lee Berger, and it was, this weird sort of, don't be claustrophobic, have some experience, in caves and stuff, I was like, that sounds so cool. So, I thought, why not? And I never thought that I would necessarily be chosen, or that having that experience would change my life absolutely completely for the better. So that was very cool.
That is just amazing. Did you ever think, or how do you feel now, that you have changed history forever?
Well, I think as far as that goes, I've personally not changed that much, but I do think that, you know, certainly being part of something that added so much new information and knowledge to the field of anthropology, of being able to study human origins, I think that's really exciting. I'd always been really drawn to the, you know, sort of narratives of our field that are, you know, the, you know, times of throwing like elephant dung at one another and then finding the Laetoli footprints, of, you know, tripping and finding, you know, this fossil or that, all those, like, you know, those moments, I love them because they were also so human, and you could see yourself having that happen. And because you don't have to be, you know, at the top of a discipline to be, you know, making those discoveries. You don't even have to know what you're looking at. You know, you can be, you know, just a caver out for a good time and make those discoveries. And I always think that's really cool, that people should keep their eyes open, and you can always, you know, always explore. I like that mindset of always sort of being a beginner, being the, you know, the first to, you know, see something.
I don't know if it was Lee Berger who came up with it, but I've definitely heard him say it the most: never stop exploring.
I'm sure that's been said a lot of times by a lot of different people, but Lee does say that a lot. And I think one of the things that is also attributed to him that I think is rather nice is that you need to avoid the backyard syndrome.
Yes, that I can bring it up in a second.
It's the things that are closest to us that we really don't see. It's actually like, it's a hack that our brain does, is like, it literally won't let us see things that that we know well, because, you know, you don't need to use that much, you know, computing power to see things that you already know. It just sort of like fuzzes in the details for you. So
the Rising Star Cave is less than 2 kilometers from two of the largest fossil sites in South Africa.
Right.
People have driven past it every day.
People they were walking
it's
over it, you know, to go to the shops, you know, while we were there, when the property was still more open and not protected.
It was right under everybody's nose.
Yeah. Well, it was directly under everyone's feet. And it's also just such a well-known cave. Like, all the cavers know Rising Star. I mean, most of them have had like a million trips through there, or a lot of them, it was even maybe their first
it was
trip.
a good training cave.
Yeah. So it's a matter of, I think that so many people would like go through there and never have it occur to them that you might be looking and see something, especially because it was so deep in the cave. And so, of course, then we're like, well, you know, don't be stupid. Of course, there's not going to be fossils that deep in the cave. And there's all these, you know, things that, you know, we tell ourselves that in order to be like smart and efficient in our use of time and resources, that are potentially, you know, damaging our ability to find something truly outstanding and unusual. It's the, you know, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. But, you know, it means you're not ever going to see that unicorn that's coming past. And that's what Rising Star was, is it was being open to something completely unknown and extraordinary. And I just wonder how many more of those types of discoveries are we missing because we are adhering so strongly to, the most parsimonious explanation.
Yes, and it's something that pains me greatly, thinking on the past, let's just say 2,000 years of human history, how many fossils could have been discovered and just thrown away. Or
I'm sure that they happen. I mean, and I'm sure they've been in like people's attics and
it's just, it's only so recently
built into fences. You'll see the breccia. Rick is really hard when we were in South Africa, it's really hard to get him inside a building because he'd start looking at the fences because these little walls of the houses are like built out of pieces of breccia, and he's like,
oh, look, there's a few rodent teeth. Oh, look, there's a bobbit. You can see the fossil sitting
come inside, have teeth
in the outside walling of their house.
That's but just like
it's not like that all the time, but but it's something that is out there. It does happen, and I think that's why it's really exciting to see the scientists that are coming up now. A lot of them they're so different than my cohort, and the way that they view things and the way that they test things, and they push back, and it's like it's so awesome to see that there's just really very cool people that are being mentored, and I'm seeing it's the people that were in my cohort that we were like, we were struggling, and I think we're the group that started to say, okay, this ends here. And so there's been some really awesome mentoring of younger scientists that I think is making it possible to ask completely different questions.
I fully agree with that. I think something that has been amazing from pretty much everyone I've interacted with on the Rising Star team is how dedicated they are to open access education. Every single person I've talked to just wants to give me as many resources as I can to share, and just give me as much information as their brains can hold. And they just want people to know and to understand.
Yeah, I think it's important that people have access not just to the information that's available from one group, but from as many different points of view as possible, so that you can really test it, that you can really see does it hold up, and that's, I think, becoming a bit more apparent to some of the scientists that were holding more along the traditional lines, holding stuff back so that like you were able to publish for life. That if you have colleagues that are out there dumping all this, data out, that's going to be the story. That's what people are going to know. And that because the human story is so complicated, we need to have more people, more data, more information out there, and just like be getting in there and tearing it apart, and seeing how it can go back together, instead of like these little camps of that scientist and their people and this scientist and their people, because it's it's not a war against one another. It's we're trying to learn more about ourselves.
Right. And definitely the field is definitely very political, and sometimes that gets put to the side when we're dealing with big egos.
Well, I think that that's that's also starting to change, is that people are realizing that you can be really successful in the field, and you can be kind, and you can really support up and coming scholars and people that are coming from different backgrounds, that it's not, oh, well, their families from academia, or people that are viewing things in a completely different way. And I was really happy to see, University Cape Town is a really big place that we were seeing that in South Africa. The scientists that are coming out of that, incredible, strong women from various African backgrounds that
Great to hear. Yeah.
are really, they're changing the way that we look at ourselves.
I think that's great. The field seems to be going in a really good direction right now. And I think it's only going to get more exciting to see what happens and what happens when we do discover more things, because I do know from Lee himself that there are a few things that we as the public don't know yet. I don't know what they are. He wouldn't tell me, but
you might be losing track, actually.
Yeah.
It's not like there's like the one thing.
Yeah, for the 5 years after Rising Star's main discovery, I was part of the team out there looking every day for fossils. So you can use your imagination to see how things went.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And I'm so excited to see what the next thing is. I know they just came out with that publication about dual use of hands in Australopithecus sediba, and just it's so exciting to see all this news, and the field is not so stale anymore. There's fresh air, and it's
one thing I will put in a plug is that if you are in South Africa, you can actually go and you can see these sites. That if you speak with people, some of the sites are only open to the scientists that work on them, but they're, many of them are really happy to, take you out to see the site. But I was, and Rick was as well. We would do tours of Malapa, and I can't tell you how exciting it is to be able to tell the story of that early hominin evolution while you're, going across the landscape, and you can see the dolomite and the different animals and the trees and the way that everything's situated and how far you are from Johannesburg, and it just really, everything just suddenly makes sense. People who are like, oh, I don't really get this evolution thing, it just suddenly makes sense, and it really drives home how funny it was that the site of Malapa was sort of the first backyard discovery that Lee had made. That he was at this beautiful site, Gladysville, which is incredibly fossiliferous, but it's almost all antelope bones. But there are so many of them, and over time, people have kept going back there because like there's got to be hominins here, and he found just like about the only two pieces that were, and it's so close to Malapa that it's really that not seeing something that's directly in front of your eyes.
Yeah, I can imagine how frustrating that must be, knowing really.
But I think things have happened as they needed to happen, because you're able to give the time to one discovery versus another discovery.
Now,
Lee has to be open, I think, with his work, because he has too much. He has too much stuff. He couldn't possibly. One person couldn't possibly. Or even a small team. It has to be a lot of people because there's so much material.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys are purposely not excavating all the fossils from Rising Star to leave for future generations?
I'm not excavating anything.
Yeah.
So.
The reasoning on the initial point was the area that was first excavated was 1 meter by 1 meter, 15 or so centimeters deep. And that was where the main 1,500 and odd bones came out.
We call that the puzzle.
Yeah, that was the amount of fossils that were just interlaced. That was enough to give everyone the information that they needed. And after that, they targeted specific sites. If they were to excavate the entire thing, you were going to cause a lot of damage to the fossils that are in the ground. And there might be technology later on that wouldn't need us to actually dig. So, or the stuff that would preserve the site a lot better, you'd be able to get a lot more information. So it was done on a conservative means to try to save from all the damage that could be done to the fossils, but also to try to get as much information as we could.
Which is actually more and more, it's a common practice to materials in situ for future generations come back. And there had been so many destructive excavations in the early years in South Africa. I mean, there's a good reason why Robert Broom was called the Mad Scotsman. I mean, he was blasting in Sterkfontein after it had been declared a geological treasure and that you shouldn't be. He got special permission from Jan Smuts just so he could do that, and that's why he ended up blowing the top off of Ms. Plez's head. So it's not that there was like a very strong history of that kind of conservative excavation in South Africa. But one thing that is also cool is Lee was one of the first scientists to be commonly CTing breccia.
Right.
Everyone was like, no, you can't do that. The artifacts, it'll make these, you won't be able to see. It'll, have that weird shatter effect. And his wife and partner, she's a radiologist, and so
help, of course, but yes.
Yeah, but so it started doing that, and that's why some of these finds, you won't ever see them as anything more than like a virtual reconstruction, because they don't physically exist in that same way. But that's, I think, to the benefit of the field, because, well, we can take them apart and put them back together any way we like, and people can work on it without damaging the fossils themselves.
Right, which is, of course, of the utmost importance. Now,
which is also limited access, because one of the things you can always say is, oh, well, I can't have you go looking at them. I can't have everyone looking at these fossils because they'll be damaged, which you can get around that. So it now sort of cuts to
you can download the 3D file and look at them.
Yeah. So it sort of like cuts to the chase. It's like, how come you aren't sharing your fossils?
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of good excuses anymore.
Now, one thing that captivates myself and many others that I just want to hear your opinion on, see if you have an idea. Purposeful body deposition. What do you think? As someone who worked on it, just opinion-wise, what do you guys think?
The amount of other creatures or other types of fossils down there was, as in the paper, was minimal. There was an owl bone and a few rodent bones. This area is quite a distance from the entrance to the cave, so the accidental wanderings is ruled off. It's not a predator disposal, because you've only got one type of animal in there, one type of fossil. You've got ages from youngster all the way up to old adults, as you can see on the size of the bones and the size of the teeth and the age of the teeth. You've got gaps in the soil where you can actually see it was deposited over a period of time. Some of the fossils were were found in situ, where you could actually see the one beautiful photo is there's a hand that was found, just a hand bone. They were found with the fingers folded over. Now, what that shows is it arrived there with flesh on it, and as the flesh slowly started to rot away, the fingers folded over. So that arrived there and stayed there from the point it was in. So ruling out all the possible situations that could have got there, that's what led them to say that it was deliberate body disposal.
I think that there's been a lot of work done to explore all the possible ways that those bones could have ended up where they are.
Research
and they're so right now, that's the explanation that has the most support. That if that's the one to beat, that's the one to falsify. So I think that it's something. It actually takes me back. I remember on the 2013 expedition that it was when I started to first understand when Darwin had said that, talking about his theory of evolution by natural selection, it was like confessing a murder, that it was really hard to get out of him, because we'd sit around, the fire every night, or, we'd be eating dinner, we'd all be talking about things. And it was sort of weird, strained conversation sometimes, because it's sort of everyone was like, it really looks like a burial, but no one wants to be the idiot who's like, yeah, it looks like it's an Australopithecine burial or something. No one wanted to, because that word burial, it has so much meaning and symbolism, and we can't know what was inside their minds, what it meant to a naledi to participate in such an act, which means that you end up with this really bizarrely sterile idea of deliberate deposition of the bodies, or deliberate disposal. But I think that's just an attempt to try to sound as conservative as possible, when really going, oh my gosh, what were they doing? It was so interesting to me that all of these things that you would not have thought that you would find these creatures so deep in the cave, and then you find another site in the same cave, and more and more, and it just at a certain point you can't say that this isn't happening, because it's you're getting smacked upside the head with all this evidence. It's well, you might not want to believe it, but I mean,
there it is,
right there.
Yeah, it's repeated.
Yeah, and so whatever is happening is something relatively extraordinary as far as our current understanding of the past. But I also remember when I was in graduate school, I remember famous words of my supervisor at the time, that there was no such thing as a Neanderthal human hybrid. That if you found Homo sapiens DNA with Neanderthal, it meant that it was contamination. That was the only way that would work. And of course, within a couple of years, we've gone, we're all over the whole shock of Neanderthal hybrids, and we have Denisovans, and we have all these other creatures in our family tree that are crawling out that we would never ever have guessed. And to say that they were not as intelligent or incredible in their own ways as we feel that we are, I think would be a mistake. So I'm excited to see what happens if that's not the reason that they're down there. I'm really looking forward to hearing why, to finding out. I mean, I think everyone just wants, to keep pushing forward and just illuminate that darkness a bit more.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Now, unless I'm mistaken, just from the timeline, I understand it. When the dates were revealed, you were done with the expedition?
Yeah, that was, the dates didn't come out until 2017.
Okay. What did you...
2015 was the first fossils, and then it was 2 years later, and that was when there was also the exhibit.
Okay. Now, what did you think of the dates? Did that surprise you?
Well, yeah, everyone I think was like, what? Like, really? But when you look at how okay, so looking at the the chronometric dates, that was like, what? Oh, okay. Just another sort of like Naledi strikes again, being as weird as possible. But when you look at the way that we have been as a field dating materials based on, phonetic, morphologic traits, it kind of scary. They're like, that's not necessarily the best way to be doing things, is, just because it looks like this age, it could be, a relic that's come up and survived through, to more modern times. That's not necessarily a really fantastic way to do dating. And it does, in a lot of ways, sort of support the idea that Naledi is actually a deep lineage that goes back to sort of those splits with Homo erectus, where we start seeing other innovations like Floresiensis and everyone else starting to come off there, where humans were sort of experimenting and doing all sorts of interesting things. And the idea that, they were living at the same time as us, it just is so mind-blowing and so beautiful. One of the cool things that they did for the exhibit that they had at Maropeng, the visitor center, the Cradle of Humankind, was they did the night sky as it would have appeared 250,000 years ago. And I always like to, take a moment before we would go and look at the fossils themselves, and I would take people through on tours to, gaze up at those and imagine, a human-like intelligence, someone like us, but not quite, gazing up at those same stars and wondering, what stories did they tell themselves? How did they experience the world? What did they see? Did they see pictures? And, when they went to sleep, did they dream like us? It's everything about this is just such a provocative, story that it draws people in. I think that's a good thing.
Definitely. It's definitely, I mean, we have so many great discoveries that are so much, even today, more well known than Homo naledi. I'd argue, Lucy is still much more well known. And we have, these other examples, but they don't come, I don't personally feel, with so much question. Like, I wonder, yes, what Lucy would think, like looking up at the night sky. But when you put it the way you just did, like they actually set it to 250,000 years ago, you're about to go see the fossils. What were these human-like beings thinking? And I think Homo naledi is just so close to us that it's really a wonder. It's maybe one of the first that you can start to conceptualize thinking the same in a way.
Well, I think that, when people look at like some of the earliest evidence for controlled use of fire in things, and speaking with CARTA, we speak with people who are academics or they're a doctor, and so these are like really super smart people that have such a hard time imagining that, do you think that they could make tools? And you're like, yeah, I can I can't nap for anything. But they had, a complex, mental template that they're able to, not just like do a one-off, is that they're searching for these materials and they're, creating them for, specific purposes and things. And that's just like really hard for a lot of people to just like be like, it's almost like telling them that like your dog is actually like secretly, diarizing their entire time with you and has this whole inner life, and that you don't know about it. I think it just comes from a lot of people, particularly it's still, I think it's an artifact from the past that we still have people that are, when they think about human uniqueness, they think about it as being so powerful that like there's nothing that's even can touch it. So you just can't even conceptualize anything like that. Whereas, I think more and more today we're finding that there are these similarities, and a lot of these come from, similar, trajectories in evolution, and that we would be able to, in some way, almost have a meeting of minds, that we would be able to understand some of what they felt. At least, I mean, as much as you can, think that you can understand the person next to you.
Right.
Thinking. I mean, there's always those barriers there, but I think that people are becoming a lot more open to the idea that human uniqueness does not exclude unique and awesome things in other hominins or other animals.
I agree.
Being special doesn't mean that no one else is.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, we've seen a lot of that with the work of like Jane Goodall and Diane Fossey. And I can never remember the orangutan's name. But just learning about other creatures really can help us learn about ourselves. So, yeah. Well, I don't want to take too much of your guys' day. I think that's about an hour, including my other interview. So, unless there's anything you guys would like to say, I think we'll wrap it up.
I'm good.
I don't have any burning admissions to get off my conscience, but I would just urge people to get out there and keep your eyes open, and if you find something that really sort of defies explanation, don't necessarily write it off. Investigate it, because sometimes you hear hoofbeats and it's not horses, it's that unicorn, and you want to be open to the possibility that something that's going to completely shift our paradigm is out there. I mean, that's how these things shift. So I think everyone should keep their eyes open and keep up the good work.
I think that's a great way to end it.
Kind.
Yes. All right, guys. Thank you again so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
And we will talk later.